There is a moment almost everyone has witnessed. Something goes wrong. A phone rings with bad news, an argument erupts, or a plan falls apart. The atmosphere in the room changes so quickly you can almost feel it happen. Most people react immediately. Voices get louder, thoughts race, and emotions spill into the open. But there is always that one person. They don't seem rushed, shaken, or overwhelmed. If anything, they become quieter. And for a second, you find yourself watching them instead of the problem, because while everyone else is reacting, they're simply calm. The psychology of people who are always calm begins there, not with composure, but with mystery. Calmness is one of the most misunderstood traits a person can have. Most people see someone who stays calm under pressure and assume they know what they're looking at. They assume confidence, strength, emotional maturity, and stability. But psychology suggests something far more interesting. The same calm behavior can come from completely different places. Two people can look equally composed on the outside while experiencing completely different realities underneath. One person's calm comes from understanding, while another person's calm comes from survival. Unless you know the story behind it, they look exactly the same. That is why calm people are often misunderstood, not because they're difficult to read, but because people stop reading too soon. Most of us secretly admire calm people. We imagine what life would feel like if stressful situations didn't affect us so much, if criticism didn't stay in our heads for hours, if anxiety didn't show up at the worst possible moments, or if difficult conversations didn't leave us replaying every word afterward. Calmness looks like freedom. It looks like someone who has figured out something the rest of us haven't, and sometimes that's true, but not always. Let's start with the first kind of calm, the calm that comes from understanding. The first thing psychology teaches us is that calm does not necessarily mean someone feels less. In fact, some of the calmest people in a room are feeling everything. They're simply managing it differently. Imagine a workplace where a major deadline suddenly collapses. The team is stressed, people are talking over each other, somebody starts blaming someone else, and another person is visibly panicking. In the middle of it all sits one person who seems completely steady. They lower their voice instead of raising it, start organizing solutions, and ask practical questions. Everyone immediately assumes they are the least affected person in the room. But that assumption is often wrong. Psychologist James Gross from Stanford University spent years studying emotional regulation and discovered something important. People who successfully control their emotional expression do not necessarily experience weaker emotions. Often, they experience the same emotions everyone else does, sometimes even more intensely. The difference is that they have learned how to create space between feeling something and reacting to it. That space is what people mistake for calmness. But creating that space takes effort, an enormous amount of effort. What looks effortless from the outside is often an invisible act of self-regulation happening every second. The calm person noticed the tension, noticed the panic, felt the stress, and simply chose not to hand control of the situation over to it. And there is a cost to doing that repeatedly. Many people who are known for being calm spend their lives carrying emotional weight that nobody realizes they're carrying, not because they're hiding it, but because they've become skilled at holding it. That distinction matters because this kind of calm is not the absence of emotion. It's the ability to stay connected to emotion without being controlled by it, and that ability usually takes years to develop. But then there is another kind of calm. And this one is much harder to recognize because it doesn't come from understanding, it comes from survival. Think about a child growing up in a home where emotions felt unpredictable, a parent whose mood could shift without warning, an environment where conflict arrived suddenly, or a household where staying quiet felt safer than speaking. The child learns something important very early. Drawing attention can be dangerous, showing emotion can make situations worse. Being small, careful, and controlled feels safer. Over time, the nervous system adapts, not consciously but automatically. Psychologists sometimes refer to this process as adaptation to chronic stress.
The brain becomes remarkably efficient at helping a person survive environments they cannot control. Years pass, the child becomes an adult, and people begin describing them with a word they hear constantly: calm. What nobody sees is that the calmness was never designed for admiration. It was designed for protection. That's what makes this type of calm so easy to misunderstand. From the outside, it can look identical to confidence. The person doesn't panic, overreact, or lose control. But internally, something very different may be happening. The nervous system learned long ago that emotions are safer when they're contained, delayed, and experienced later, alone, behind closed doors. This is why some people seem almost superhuman during a crisis. They become focused, efficient, and functional. Then, hours later, when nobody's watching, everything finally catches up to them. The calm was real, but it wasn't peace. It was protection. And perhaps the most difficult part is that many people carrying this kind of calm don't even realize where it came from. They think it's simply who they are. They've worn the armor for so long that it feels like skin. And this is where the story becomes more complicated. Survival calm can become so automatic that people slowly lose touch with what they're feeling, not intentionally, but gradually. The same protection that once helped them survive can begin creating distance from emotions they no longer know how to access. The highs become quieter. The lows become quieter. Everything becomes quieter. Again, this can look impressive from the outside. People describe them as unshakable. Nothing bothers them. Nothing gets to them. But psychology asks a different question. If nothing gets to them, what else isn't reaching them? Joy, excitement, wonder, and connection. The same wall that keeps pain out can sometimes keep life out too. And that is the contradiction most people never consider. What looks strongest isn't always healthiest, and what looks calm isn't always peaceful. Sometimes calmness comes from understanding, sometimes it comes from survival. And yet there is one final truth that ties all of this together. When people encounter someone who is consistently calm, they often focus on the behavior. They ask how. How do they stay so composed? How do they stay so steady? How do they never seem overwhelmed? But the more important question is why. Because behavior is only the surface. The story underneath is where the real psychology lives. Two people can respond to the exact same situation with the exact same calm expression. One is regulating emotions skillfully, the other is protecting themselves from emotions they learned long ago were unsafe to express. Unless you look deeper, they appear identical. That's the realization hidden underneath all of this. The calmest person in the room is not necessarily the strongest, the healthiest, or the least affected. Sometimes they have spent years learning how to hold things that other people immediately put down. Sometimes they have survived things nobody knows about. And sometimes they have simply developed the ability to feel deeply without letting those feelings take control. So the next time you meet someone who always seems calm, resist the urge to assume you understand them. Because calmness is not a personality, it's a language. And like every language, it can mean very different things depending on who is speaking it. If people describe you as calm, I'm curious, which kind of calm do you recognize most in yourself? The calm that comes from understanding your emotions, or the calm that comes from learning to protect them? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the calmest people are carrying the deepest stories. And if you enjoy exploring psychology, human behavior, and the hidden patterns behind the way people think and feel, subscribe for more videos like this.